Unit 6.2, I think we're on part 5. This is socialism. We're going to talk about the product of all of these revolutions, all of this time of industrialization. So socialism becomes a product of these individuals' lifetime. I mean, they lived through the French Revolution, they lived through the industrial, scene. This is what the last thing they're remembering: French Revolution, Industrial Revolution, page 25, or at the bottom where it says socialism. At first, I thought it was our last ism, so I even put a big smiley face right here but now that's squashed. So now we can put a frowny face and just put last ism of the week. Uh, it's Friday. Realism just crushed our romantic dreams. Look, I was a romantic for like 2 seconds. I put a smiley face and I was optimistic about something that wasn't real. Look at me. I feel back. Thank you, Steven. The black tea was what I needed. Thank you.
Oh,
Yeah.
do you guys know the new show on Comedy Central that replaced Colbert? They did a segment on it called People 100. And it's like People 100% real. And if you don't People 100% real, then the host throws tea at you and it's you got some weak tea.
That is awesome.
So,
Like, how cool would that be if, like, we were talking and then, like, the district people came in and you weren't keeping it 100% real and I'm just throwing tea at you?
That's some
Big tea. Alright. Oh, man, I'm losing followers by the day. Anyway, so, the desire to reorganize society and establish cooperation in a new kind of community is going to rise here. Like, people are like, man, this is not working out. The French Revolution and all these revolutions that came after this Industrial Revolution, remember, we talked about how workers' lives will get better, but that's going to take some time. So people are really like, how can we put a perfect society together? How can we fix this? And namely, how can we fix the misery of these working classes? Because misery. We have all of these people who are miserable in their plight. They are being taken advantage of by the bourgeoisie, by the corporations, by those getting rich off of them. And so we're going to see that the early socialists, of course, where do you guess they come from? Okay, Lucas? No, not Germany. That's Romanticism. Where would France? Yeah, France is going to start us off with our socialists. They're going to be the first that we're going to talk about, these early French socialists. And they're going to kind of build the bridge. I like to say that they're kind of stuck between the romantics and the realists, these socialists. They probably come up with the craziest plans but don't really know how to get them there. And I'll make sense of that when I get to one gentleman, because I read his stuff and I'm like, I'm not sure that he was drinking tea when he was at home writing this. So, word of the day, tea. Anyway, so our early French socialists are going to propose a system of greater economic equality planned by the government, sometimes called utopian socialism. So this is where you're going to see, and here's my cynicism popping through again, none of these ever work, really. Like, they try, and I just don't know that human beings can get along in utopian societies. Right? We haven't seen one yet. They're going to be very, yeah, it's like too perfect to exist, and then it has to replace itself with something else. But they're very idealistic, kind of like liberal prophets is what I would call these early socialists, and turn toward urban communities. So our first one, Mr. Humpty Dumpty here, and I think that's mainly because of the way I moved the picture, but he also just kind of looks funny too. But Count Henri de Saint-Simon, 1760 to 1825. He believed that industrialization, aided by science, would bring a wondrous new age to Europe. So he's really into the process of the scientific revolution, adding it to industry. It's going to bring this new wonderful age, and that proper social organization within this industrialization would require the parasites. Love, like, he just goes straight for a nasty word. The parasites, the upper class, the aristocracy, the lawyers, the churchmen, to give way. Giving way meaning give precedence to the doers, the scientists, the engineers, and the industrialists. He sought public works projects and established investment banks, so he's really still like that utopian society. He thought every social institution should have as its main goal the improved conditions for the poor. So he really focused on the plight of the poor, the plight of the worker, but his communities all fell apart. None of them lasted. None of them could coexist together very successfully. at all. Not even a significant amount of time that we're going to talk about just one community. So, Louis Blanc, we have already talked about. This is just a reminder. I'm trying to put things chronological as well as contextual for you in this second semester so you don't catch yourself in that paradigm as Matt came to me first semester and not sure exactly where things fell in the scope of the timeline.
Oh, yeah.
So Louis Blanc we had to talk about in the revolutions in France, but he's also a socialist from that time period. So Louis Blanc is our guy that created those workshops in France, and when they dismissed him, remember then the people rose up, and he was responsible for the June Days Revolution, or played a role in that when they removed the workshops. So this is Louis Blanc. He is in France. He had a more practical approach than other French socialists. He's not as far out there. Like he's not like, ooh, we can create these perfect communities and live utopian. He creates the workshops to help the poor. He urged workers to fight for universal suffrage. So he actually has a plan. Like, if we give the workers all the right to vote, they can change the world through their vote. Not like, ooh, let's all put them in an apartment together and see if they can get along. He thought the government should set up workshops that guaranteed full employment. He thought if everyone was employed, then that would take care of this have and have-not situation. And he did get those workshops through, but we know only for a short time, because when the government yanks them away, we saw the June Days Revolution in 1848. He believes the right to work should be added to those individual liberties from the Enlightenment, and the root to all evil is competition. He would hate capitalism. Competition is the root of all evil. Yes, ma'am. He is holding his hand in his shirt.
Oh, just kidding.
Like this?
I guess
Yeah.
he's all like, I'm all fucking happy.
Yeah.
The drawing isn't as good as
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the earliest picture of Thug Life. He's hiding his face again.
I never noticed that about that picture she said it, but yeah, he's doing a very Napoleon-esque, like, resting period.
It's no, you're right.
Back to the onion. So Pierre Joseph Proudhon, 1809 to 1865, gave us the book What is Property. I think he kind of coins the title of his book off Edmund Burke's book What is the Third Estate, or we have What is the Third Estate, and so he kind of coins it off of that. So what is property? 1840. He believed that property was stolen from the worker. That all property was the workers, but it was stolen by these haves, and the worker was the source of all wealth. So he's trying to kind of flip it on its end. His ideas will later be a huge influence on Karl Marx. Karl Marx is going to turn to a lot of his writings. He thought there were two types of people in the world, owners and non-owners, and the non-owners have had their belongings stolen by the owners. So the rightful people are not holding, like, possession is not 9/10 or is 9/10 of the law, or however you would say that. He was often considered an anarchist, as he greatly feared the power of the state. He was very fearful of government any kind of government policy. Like Louis Blanc's workshops, he would have been like, whoa, 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 that's the government trying to keep a pen. Like, they're just going to try to kill all the workers one day. I mean, yeah. So he kind of went to that edge. But what was taken from him for Marx was that things have been stolen from the working class. And then Charles Fourier, 1772 to 1837, was actually in this guy. This guy's just fun. He was a traveling salesman by day, and he came home every night and then wrote down all of his ideas. And he sought a planned economy and socialist community. He sketched out these apartments where the rich people would live on top and the poor people would live down. You're like, well, that's not very socialist. That's very divided. But how you were rich in his community is if your job was the least pleasant, you got paid the most money. If your job was the most pleasant, you got paid. Bless you.
I'm sorry.
I thought it was like totally laughing. I was like, I laughed too. And if your job was the most pleasant, so you got paid the least pleasant, you got paid the most. So I mean, no, I guess the guy cleans up the crap in the streets should be the richest guy living upstairs. And I don't think my job's unpleasant at all. So then I would unfortunately be living downstairs in the basement. Yes, ma'am. Well, that's unfortunate. Is that they're trying to punish themselves? It's like 10 Hail Marys. Like, oh, you really hate children, go teach. You must repent. Mhm. So it's very subjective, I guess, to how you feel. But so I mean, he drew out these apartments. They're all these little pods, utopian society. Um, I don't know, just income based. He also believed, and this is where things kind of get, so you can kind of follow where he's going there. Like with the workers' plight, like maybe it's not all workers have been stolen from, maybe we should just look at the degree of the job. And you can kind of see that community, like sharing thing. But then he's going to go into marriage, and he thinks marriage is a form of prostitution. He believes you should be able to enter into any sexual relationship you want with someone, but that sexual relationship should not be endorsed by marriage, because especially I guess in this time period, if you were a woman, your husband works all day, he has all of the money, and then so really you're only married to him for what then he would want when he got home. So it's a form of prostitution, and that's what he thought about marriage. And he wanted to emancipate all women, emancipate them from their marriages and from their families and from, so yeah, kind of. But then this is where it really gets out there. He predicted that the Earth is gonna at one day have 6 moons. And then, I mean, he did make one prediction that might actually come true. He thinks the North and the South poles are actually going to become warm, where the rest of the Earth won't become cold. And then he predicts that all of the world's oceans will become lemonade.
Wait, are these just like predictions, or are they like
Yeah.
founded? Like,
No, these are like these are predictions, and as far as I can find, I mean, his education pretty much relied just on business. I mean, he was a salesman by day, but the oceans are going to become lemonade.
One of them makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, he's just kind of out there. I just like how he evolves from like the workers' plight to like these future predictions of the world. And I don't think his predictions were like, if we don't change things, this is what will happen. He's like, no, this is gonna happen, regardless. So, I don't know.
Somebody's gonna force some lemons in the
Yeah. He also said, I mean, one thing I do like about him, you should make work like play to make people want to work harder, so their jobs should feel fun. I'm like, well, that's a good thing. That should be mottos at work. Next, before Engels, I did put a little side note in here about Christian socialism. It's really going to begin in England, and we're going to come back to it, but it believed the evils of industrialism would be ended by following Christian principles. They take this from the book of Acts. In Acts, A-C-T-A-S, there is a story about how Christians tried to live communally and share everything. And so they're like, oh, yeah, we should do that. They should have read a little bit further in that biblical story, though, because in the book of Acts, there's a couple that then refuse to turn in their money and their goods and keep it all to themselves. And it doesn't work out. So, yeah. Yes. It attempted to bridge the gap between the anti-religious socialism and Christian social justice for workers, and we'll come back to that because there's going to be all kinds of social programs that we're going to get into. But then Friedrich Engels, we've already talked about him. We're reviewing him in the context of socialism because he belongs here as well. He lashed out at the middle classes, if you remember, and the condition of the working class in England in 1844. His future revolutionary and colleague of Karl Marx, who believed the capitalist middle class ruthlessly exploited the proletariat. We talked about that. Engels, if you remember, was a very bourgeoisie, very upper class. He was running his family's factories and then came to see these horrible working conditions and wrote this book. He meets up with Marx, if you want to turn the page to the Communist Manifesto. And scientific socialism or Marxism will then be developed by Marx and Engels together. Although Marx gets all of the credit, which would totally take me off if I was Engels, because Marx is what you'd call a moocher. Mm-hmm. Marx was like a poor, just focused on his writings kind of guy. He lived off of Engels' hospitality, off of his wealth. And he didn't work, he just stayed at home and wrote and did the work for what will later be called Marxism, not Engelsism. But, they together put together the Communist Manifesto. It is considered the Bible of communism. And so they intended to replace utopian hopes and dreams with brutal militant blueprint for socialist working class. Here's some guys. I don't want this to come off wrong. Here's some guys, though, I can like give a pat on the back. They weren't like, ooh, here's this huge ideal, and then there's no framework to get there. They actually focused on what a step-by-step blueprint and plan would look like to get you to communism. There has to be a blueprint. They were like, you can't be like those revolutionaries in 1848. Like, you have to have a plan of how you're going to get there. Unfortunately for their dream, it has never been followed step by step. We have never gone to a stateless society. In fact, it's almost gone the opposite in places that have decided to embrace communism. It's gone to a very state-run society, which is the opposite of what pure communism is. So we'll talk about that as we travel along. Marx is focused on the teachings of Hegel. If you remember Hegel, he's the one with the thesis and the antithesis. And like when gray was the thesis, white counters it with its synthesis, and that equals, black or whatever. And so he becomes focused on this, and he creates a theory of dialectical materialism. And he is going to make a step-by-step plan of communism. I think I include, did I not? Oh, there's the Communist Manifesto. There we go, the dialectic in action. So, Marx would say that it all started with the thesis of feudal lords, so all the way back at the Middle Ages where we started. And their antithesis, or their opposite, what came to challenge the feudal lords, would be the serfs and peasants. And what was produced from that was city life. Okay, so we moved from the rural economy, and city life will become the center. That becomes our new thesis, or our synthesis. What will challenge that is guilds. Guilds begin to challenge city life, and that's our antithesis. And then that would be create entrepreneurs. That becomes our new synthesis or thesis. Its antithesis will be the proletariat. And then that will create a classless society. Okay? So all of these lead to what Marx would say then will be this dialectical materialism. It's the economic interpretation of history. All human history is determined by economic factors, mainly by those who control the means of production and distribution. And he's going to coin those terms really as we use them today, bourgeoisie and proletariat. I typed them down in your notes on, where did I type them for you? On number 6. So I put them in there if you don't want to write them. But the haves and the have-nots. And so he's going to say all of this can be traced to history. The class struggle has been here since the beginning of time. Between the rich and poor. So he's going to say it's been here, you just haven't noticed it. It's more profound now with the Industrial Revolution. And he says the theory of surplus value, like Proudhon, that the true value of a product is labor. And since the worker receives a very small portion of money for what they actually provide to the action of production, then the difference or the surplus value has also been stolen from him by the capitalist. So here you have the ideal of skilling again, and that's where he takes his ideas. So socialism was inevitable. Capitalism contains the seeds of its own destruction, overproduction, and unemployment. And so it will implode upon itself. And then this is where you will see the workers, I think as he phrases it, will throw off their chains and revolt. And if it has to be bloody, he says, let it be bloody. Let it be a revolution, but let it be planned and let it be in the good of everyone. So violent revolution will happen because of the increasing gap between the proletariat and bourgeoisie will be so great that the working class will rise up and create a dictatorship of the proletariat. So this will last for a little while. So not the stateless economy yet. Working men of all countries will then unite. And at the end of this, after there has been working men united and they have been in charge of things, then that will be dismantled and we will have a complete classless society. From each according to his abilities to each according to his needs is a famous quote in this process. And that just means do what you're good at and get paid what you need. So if you have 12 kids, you'll get paid enough to feed 12 kids. If you have 2, you'll get paid enough for 2. So it's kind of that concept that equal isn't fair. Hey, what's up? Cool. I think I wrote myself a message on there too. So, and then that would finally lead to that utopian classless society that he's talking about, whether it has to happen through revolution. So the impact of socialism on European politics will become profound by the late 19th century, which we're going to talk about, and it's the topic of your DBQ. So you'll probably want to highlight this section here on the beginning impacts. A great paragraph topic may also be the plight of women at this time. We've already talked about a couple that are going to try to truly emancipate women. We're getting to women here as well under Marx. His view is going to be a little bit different than some other socialists we've talked about. So, like I said, it's been tried but never fully recognized. We've never gotten to that classless society yet. In fact, it's gone completely opposite of what Marx would have said. Thank you. So you see my feminist poster here. My Marxist feminist dialect brings all the boys to the yard. That is, I was like the most hilarious. I tried to get them to make that the T-shirt last year. The boys weren't going for it. But I was like, that is awesome. Yes. See, that would go great with our Napoleon Bonaparte shirt. We just keep a red Solo Cup theme going for all of eternity. All right. I don't think I did another slide on women. Nope. Okay. So, Marx saw women as being doubly oppressed. So he's like, man, I mean, he really sees the plight of women as super horrendous by capitalists that paid them low wages and exploited their labor, and by society that gave them a second-class status. Women will eventually play an influential role in the socialist movement. I mean, I would make note of that. Women, if you got a socialist topic on an FRQ or a DBQ, would make a great paragraph if you could latch on to socialists that promoted women and women that are going to become active in the 19th century. Yes? I would say, that's hard more or less. I would say just in different ways. He's looking at the exploitation by other people, where Mills, I think, is looking more at the equality of, like, does that make sense? Like, so he's looking more at, like, people who are oppressed and held down, more so than what your individual liberties are. So I would say almost equal, but in different ways. That's a good question. They would be really interesting to compare. Like, if you were going to do an FRQ and compare them down the middle, you could probably do some great contrasts there as well, with some textual support. And then Marxism was an atheistic philosophy, so he doesn't allow any room for God in this decision. That's what Laura was jumping for. And so I just throw that in there because you will need to know it's not quite like our deists. He's not going to just say, oh, God is here, but he has a place over here. He's going to be like, no. And this, it's us. We got this. Like, we just need to take it ourselves. And so here we come to the charts, and I want to talk to you about our charts. Okay? So 19th century political study guide by periods. This extends far past where we are now. We only went up to 1848. I've taken you 1848 then through 1914. These will be great charts to add to. I did this because we are getting into the 19th century. Your paper's about the 19th century. You could pull some stuff we haven't talked about yet from this without having to do too much work. Also, these charts you'll want to pluck out and keep as study materials. The first chart is going to just go through conservatism in each country during each period. As we start to see the Congress of Vienna fall apart, as we edge towards World War I, you're going to want to know what was going on. And then if you flip, it does that for nationalism. It also does it for liberalism, and it does it for socialism. Okay? I left Romanticism out because I told you at the beginning of this lecture, I typed it up per area in the notes, so you can go back and look for it there. I think I just didn't want to type up the Romanticism. Just kidding. It's easier to do that one in segments. And then if you go to the 19th century political study guide by isms, this breaks it up, and I did the Romanticism in for you. This is all of the isms by country. So this isn't by time period, but I tried to keep it chronological in each column so that you would be okay. And what I'd like you to really look at this is, if you looked at conservatism in England and France, can you check mark that you understand each of those things? It's kind of like a pre-made study guide. It also is going to do you a lot of good with FRQs and DBQs, because I've pretty much already divided topics and paragraphs for you. Trying to keep it civilized in here. Then if you turn to the other page, of course, you have your real ism countries. You have Germany, Austria, Hungary, Italy, Poland, Russia. There's a lot more in each box there. And then there's our terms to know. We have covered pretty much everything, and of course they're all bolded in your notes for you, so they shouldn't be hard to find. Questions, essay questions that we've covered, just to make sure that you're on track here. We've already talked about the extent of the balance of power, and that's the one of the goals of the Congress of Vienna, was to keep one nation, especially France, from gaining too much control. We talked about how conservatism, or to what extent, now you fulfilled that. To what extent was conservatism able to achieve its objectives? I think they kept, they gave a couple small things away, but I think they were able to maintain conservatism. Even with these liberal uprisings, the revolutions of 1830 and 1848, we had one true success, right? And then a lot of just hold-offs. To what extent did liberals and nationalists achieve their goals in Europe between 1815 and 1900? I would say not well. We are going to start to see they're going to start to think, oh, I should plan. I should be a realist. I should get people together. We should be organized. We're going to start to see some successes. Why was there no revolution in Britain in the period of 1815 to 1848? Teapot. Evolution rather than revolution. Okay, so you... Yes, who appreciated it. Yes, their form of parliament. 5. Compare and contrast the ideals of the Romantic era with those of the Enlightenment. So this is where you're like, okay, you study the flower or you feel the flower. You measure the mountain or you feel the mountain. You could go with any of the great and non-cynical comments I gave you about the Romantic era versus the reason of the Enlightenment. Pretty much it says it right there, reason versus feeling. Like, are you going to go with your head or your heart? To what extent did Romanticism play a political and philosophical role in Europe? I would say a lot. This, like, I have a dream, I have a feeling, I'm going to go. I mean, look at our romantics that are they're running off to support other nations in their plight. I mean, for independence, just on this feeling of, like, I should help with those nationalistic liberal. So I would say, without Romanticism there, I think they have to go together, the revolutions and Romanticism of this period. We'll see a new kind of revolution when we get realism for this next period. So, I don't know. I feel like we hit everything that we wanted to in a timely manner. Is there anything that I've left off here that you guys have concerns, questions, issues about? I feel like there's some fun FRQs coming up. We're going to draw numbers, and so there'll be 11 different FRQs. And this next unit, each of you will have a different FRQ, and then you will post them to Edmodo in an assignment thing, so then everyone will have an FRQ to read, and this gives everyone just some extra views of different kinds of FRQs. And then we have some fun in-class activities coming up. Things are going to get much more familiar and start to feel like all good and warm. Our lectures will go faster because you already know the names and kind of the concepts, and we'll be able to stop and do a lot more hands-on. Everybody feel good? You guys seem like... Okay, so there was our last ism for this week. And then we will pick up next week with Unit 6 Unit 6.2, Night Citizen Society, Urbanization, and Intellectual Movement. I'm going to go pick these up for you because I made you a copy. Although I'm not requiring reading of Chapter 19 and 20 fully like we did for 15 and 16, I do suggest that you peruse it, that you add some things, and I think this packet will help you with your DDQ. Okay, I know it will help you with your DDQ in socialism and the impact. So I'll get these for you in just a second. I'm going to push done.